Good day, liberators and fellow South Africans. What I'm going to share with you now is very important, and please watch the entire video up till the end. And if you find it informative, which I believe you will, please share it with others. And this information needs to be shared with as many as possible people so that everyone can know what is currently going on with all these national disasters and national states of disasters currently facing us. Now, we just moved from one terminated national state of disaster, and we are now finding ourselves into a new one. And that one has been declared for the ongoing floods and all the disasters with the weather. Um, Interestingly, yes, we have not received the promulgation of the national state of disaster yet, but we can assume that it will be published sooner than later. So let me just first kick off and describe the one threat that we've got, and that is in relation to the national health regulations. One organization did go to court recently in the Western Cape fighting this, and we're definitely supporting everyone who is trying to assist us and rescuing us from all these atrocities that's currently facing us for the past 2 years. But there is a reason why Liberty Fighters Network has not challenged those draft regulations in court as yet. And let me just first go to the letter that we wrote on that was on the 31st of March, and this was the letter to Minister of Health, and we said there was an incorrect publication of draft amendments to the regulations relating to the surveillance and the control of notifiable medical conditions of 2017, and we basically said that he was supposed to publish those drafts under a certain section of the National Health Act, in which we can be afforded 3 months to make comments. However, he did that under the quick way, and he has invented only a 1 month comment period on those regulations. And there's authority to say that draft regulations are not law yet, so it cannot be challenged in a court of law. So only after those regulations have come into operation, after you have attempted via your comments to the minister to change those very regulations, and he did not listen to you and he continued to publish it, only then one can then challenge it in court. And that was the purpose of our letter, to warn him that we know that he was doing it incorrectly, and if he does proceed publishing it, promulgating it formally, then Liberty Fighters Network at that point will challenge it. And there was also a further reason why we as Liberty Fighters Network was quiet until we waited until the 16th of April to say anything further, because the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs made another big mess of her termination of the national state of disaster. And let me show you what has happened here. She, in her termination of the national state of disaster for COVID-19, on the 4th of April 2022, she made mention here that therefore she is terminated in terms of section 27(5)(b) of the Act, hereby terminate the national state of disaster. Now, what is this 27(5)(b) of the Act? And let me show you what is going on here. In terms of the National or the Disaster Management Act, section 27(5), which she is referring to, a national state of disaster that has been declared in terms of subsection 1A lapses 3 months after it has been declared, so it's automatic lapsing. Then B, may be terminated by the minister by notice in the Gazette before it lapses in terms of paragraph A. And paragraph A here refers to the 3 months period. So she can terminate the national state of disaster within the 3 months. That is the reference to section 27(5)(b). But this was not a 3 month period. This was an extension of that. So she could only have terminated it in terms of section 27.5b if she was still within the 3 month period. Now, when does she have the authority to then cut it, to terminate the national state of disaster if she has extended it from month to month? Let's read what the Act is saying. Now, here it says in paragraph C that a national state of disaster that has been declared in terms of subsection 1 may be extended by the minister by notice in the Gazette for 1 month at a time before it lapses in terms of paragraph A, or the existing extension is due to expire. So it means here, people, that when you actually read this in the Act itself, it says that when she has extended it, she can only terminate it by way of waiting for the 30-day period to lapse. And only then, after that lapse, it's terminated. So she could never have formally lodged or made promulgated the termination of the national state of disaster on the 4th of April. She had to wait until the 15th of April, and from the 16th of April, it's automatically, if not extended, it automatically lapsed. So now the point is that in that very proclamation, she made mention of, let me just quickly see here, she then in this same proclamation that she made, she said that your regulation 67, regulation 69, regulation 75, as she made it on the 4th of April 22, will continue. Now, my question here is, that if the promulgation of the termination of the national state of disaster was invalid, she could not have made it in terms of section 27.5b, then the entire promulgation is then null and void, meaning that we don't have any regulations that she said would have continued anymore since the 16th of April. So people, the national state of disaster for COVID-19 has formally legally ended from the 16th of April. And because the promulgation on the 4th of April was totally incorrectly done, because there is no such termination as she referred to, the entire promulgation is null and void. So they cannot go and enforce any of those regulations anymore. So now what has happened was something very interesting. We then went, and very important in this whole thing is that the Minister of Health, when he on the 14th of April said that that the comments would be extended to the 24th of April, he made mention and section 3.2 of the International Health Regulations Act 1974, Act number 28 of 1974. So these regulations that he promulgated was done, number one, this Gazette 46045 was later on replaced by 46048. So again, he made a mistake in this. So it should have read here in regards of 46048. But in any event, he specifically referred here to the sections of the International Health Regulations. And people, when I handle the International Health Regulations, I want to show you what the judiciary of South Africa did. Okay, let's go to our own very case. Our judgment of the 2nd of June 2020, when we challenged the national state of disaster to say that the NSD could never have been promulgated because there were other legislation already on board which could have dealt with it. Then this is what our beloved Justice Davis had to say then. Let me go to this, and in our judgment of that day, in paragraph 4.9, the mere say so that there exists no existing legislation by which the national executive could deal with a disaster is disputed by the applicants, so Liberty Fighters Network and myself, and they contend that any such determination by the minister was both misplaced and irrational. Their contention is made with reference to the International Health Regulations Act 28 of 1974. And let's just listen here what Davis had to say about our argument that those international health regulations could have been utilized. He went on to say that their contention is made with reference to the international health regulations. In terms of this act, the president, but it was changed later on to say that it was the Minister of Health, may by mere proclamation invoke the international health regulations for dealing with a disaster. These regulations appear, however, not to have been updated, and neither do they specifically provide for COVID-19, presumably due to the novelty thereof. It is therefore difficult to assess whether this act can adequately provide for the national executive to deal effectively with this disaster. Now, in the Freedom Front case of the 10th of July under case 22939 of 2020, this was heard by a full bench of judges of the Pretoria High Court, Gauteng Division. And let me just quickly go here. What they also, the Freedom Front Plus, also argued that the national state of disaster could never have been declared because there were other law. Now in paragraph 79 it says that the second respondent points out in an answering affidavit, that was the Minister of Kochta, that this act is wholly inadequate to deal effectively with the COVID-19 disaster. Its purpose is to control and contain the spread of infectious diseases between countries. It provides for specific measures to prevent the spread of health risks through international travel and cargo. It provides no assistance in containing the threat posed by virulent diseases that are transmitted within a country's borders. The applicant does not dispute the second respondent's averments in this regard. This puts an end to this leg of the attack. So, in other words, what happened in that case of the Freedom Front Plus is that apparently the Freedom Front Plus just accepted the version given to court by the Minister of Cooperative Governance, and they did not challenge it. So the court then basically said, well, sorry, you lost out. There's no indication that that act could have been utilized. And now, strangely, as you have now seen for yourself, the Minister of Health have even reference to Section 3.2 of the International Health Regulations, and let's go to those regulations to say that this wasn't very old. So this was published way back on the 15th of March 1974 already. The only change here that was made was that the state president was replaced by the Minister of Health. But 3.2, what does that say to us? The Minister of Health may make regulations to give effect to any provision of the international health regulations as applicable in the Republic, prescribing fees and providing for the recovery of any expenditure incurred in connection with the application in the Republic of the international health regulations. So the Minister of Health could have, in terms of these regulations as well, promulgated regulations. It was there. But strangely, in both our case and the case of Freedom Front Plus, the court said, oh no, you are wrong, it cannot happen. And this is, or let me show you another last nail in the coffin for the judiciary of South Africa. Here they say in those regulations currently in force, dated 15 December 2017, so it's the regulations relating to the surveillance and the control of notifiable medical conditions of 2017. Now, in Regulation 2, let me show you this. It says that in implementing these regulations, the following must be taken into account: the provisions of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, full respect for the dignity, confidentiality, and rights of and fundamental freedoms of persons, and the requirement by the International Health Regulations 2005 for countries to develop the capacity to detect, assess, notify, and respond promptly and effectively to public health risk. It's public health risk, not like what the court said in the Freedom Front Plus case, that it's for international infections. So here, and let's see what the definition of a public health risk is. It's defined here in the very regulations. Public health risk means a likelihood of an event that may adversely affect the health of human populations, with the emphasis on one which may spread internationally or may present a serious and direct danger. So clearly those regulations could have been utilized. So with the national state of disaster terminations, the one after the other is totally conflicting with what was said before. So this is a Poespas, people, really. They are clearly thinking that we are totally stupid. They don't think that we are intelligent at all to figure this out. And let me just end with this and then a very interesting thing that I want to show you. This is the Interpretation Act of number 33 of 1957 in section 17. It specifically says here that where a minister makes a regulation of any kind, the minister must send or submit to Parliament those regulations, and when it's within a period of 14 days. So that clearly means that when the Minister of Kogta made the very first regulations in terms of the National Disaster Management Act, she had to send those regulations, submit it to Parliament, so the moment when Parliament receives it within 14 days, they are then seized with it and they can immediately counter it if they are not happy. So all these political parties who made us to believe that they did not have any authority to intervene in these regulations that haunted us for more than 2 years, sorry people, sorry parliamentarians, you lied to us. There's law to specifically say that those regulations were supposed to be submitted to you, to Parliament, and when it's submitted, you are automatically seized with it, and you could immediately do something about it. And to put another final nail in the coffin, on the 19th of January 2022, totally undetected, in Government Gazette 45789, Dr. Tao has classified the floods and the rains and storms and winds and sinkholes as a national disaster then already. So if Dr. Tao way back in January have classified the weather conditions as a national disaster, and nothing came from that, but now only when these rains came and a provincial, it was classified as a provincial disaster, he now suddenly woke up on the 13th of April to say that it's a national disaster. But he already declared or classified the weather way back in January as a national disaster. So why did the government not declare a national state of disaster then already, if they believe that the damages were so excessive that the province or the provinces could not deal with it? So they've already said so way back in January. So why did they not do something about it? Only now they want to declare a national state of disaster for the weather, while they could have done it way back in January already. Strange, isn't it? But this might be because Liberty Fighters Network wrote another letter to them. And let me just quickly read this very interesting letter to you. On the 12th of April, so it was a day before Tel classified it as a national disaster, we wrote a letter to him to say, classification of the claimed COVID-19 pandemic in terms of Section 23 of the Disaster Management Act and access to the Section 17 Disaster Management Information System. Now, in this, we asked him 3 questions. So we asked the questions, it's actually 4 questions. Firstly, did the National Disaster Management Center at any point reclassify the claimed COVID-19 pandemic as either a provincial or local disaster, and if so, when and how? And then secondly, if the NDMC has not reclassified or could not reclassify the disaster as a no disaster, according to you, would that imply that your 15 March 2020 classification of the national state of disaster stand indefinite, for which another national state of disaster may be declared, again in terms of Section 27.1 of the DMA and any time in future? And thirdly, and this is where it comes, I unfortunately, in this sense, had my crystal ball. So it's not only Dr. Karim who has got a crystal ball to look into the future. I unfortunately also have one, because I've asked him this question. That thirdly, take for example into consideration your national disaster classification dated 19 January 2025, based on the fact that no specific reference had been made of which weather conditions triggered the National Disaster Management Center to classify that as a national disaster. Would you say that the Minister of Kogta may, if she so wishes, use that classification to again declare a national state of disaster in terms of Section 27.1 for the current weather conditions in KwaZulu-Natal? Sorry people, I don't know whether I was the trigger for what has happened now, but it was on the 12th of April, and now we have a national state of disaster. But the point is that what made this disaster now, or this classification which was upgraded from a provincial disaster to a national disaster only now, which made this more a national disaster than what the weather conditions on the 19th of January was. People, if you don't understand it, don't worry, I also don't understand it. It's a Poespas. All we can do now, and this is what let me tell you what I believe will happen now. And I'm looking in my glass ball. The national or the health regulations, which we are now so concerned about, will not happen, because they realize that that is for all diseases, all conditions, and they cannot take measures for COVID-19 and apply to all of them. So I doubt whether the health minister will promulgate it. And I think that is why he said that he's going to, we've got time until the 24th of April to give comments, so that the ongoing court process that is currently in the Western Cape is going to be flawed by them, because they want most probably to show that that there's no chance that those regulations will apply, because the minister can now come in and create new regulations under the new national state of disaster and incorporate into those regulations health conditions, to say health measures, spreading of disease as a result of the floods. And she can then take those regulations and put it in there. So they have most probably only declared the national state of disaster, well knowing that a provincial disaster would have been sufficient, because they did not see any reason to do anything from the 19th of January, while there was already classification of a national disaster. And then suddenly they're going to show the ongoing court process that, oh, you see, you were premature. We actually decided to go this way now. And then, unfortunately, that process is totally flawed. And if many organizations tip in and they're taking this further on the grounds of challenging the health regulations, which is not on our law books yet. When it comes to the point that we, for example, Liberty Fighters Network, join those proceedings, and I'm not saying they are doing it as any other activist would have done it. Yes, we saw it from a different angle. So they are not incompetent. They've done what was expected of them. And now this is the potential threat we are facing, that if a lot of organizations are going to pursue that, and it comes out to say that it has flawed, then the government have taken a lot of us for a fool. This was my opinion surrounding the national states of disaster, national disaster classification, and the health regulations. So you are more than willing to, or that you're more than welcome to have a different opinion, and I will respect your opinion surrounding it. And it's good for debates to continue surrounding these subjects. We have now basically shown the government that we are not idiots. They have definitely underestimated our intelligence, and they are in such a stalemate position now that they cannot get out of this. And unfortunately, our judiciary has again shown that they cannot be trusted. Even with our very own Judge Davis in the beginning, he could have done quite more to investigate and hear our arguments surrounding the national state of disaster and the implications of the international health regulations. But most probably he was told to hold on that so that the full bench of judges could deal with it. Thank you very much for everything and for being a supporter, obviously. Thank you very much for the donations that we receive. We really appreciate it. And if you like this, please share it. And we have got quite a lot of coming court cases and battles that we will share with you. God bless. Until the next time.